The golden poison frog is one of the most toxic frogs in the world, and a single individual has enough poison to kill 10 to 20 people.
So just what makes these tiny amphibians so deadly? Well, it's because they contain a poison called batrachotoxin. Batrachotoxin, or BTX for short, is a steroidal alkaloid found in certain species of poisonous frogs in Central and South America, which are commonly called poison dart frogs due to their toxin being used to coat dart tips to make poison darts in these areas. These darts make extremely good weapons, but to understand why they're so effective, you first have to understand how BTX works. First of all, the frogs on their own are not naturally poisonous, meaning that they don't normally contain BTX, but rather they gain this toxin through their dietary intakes.
Insects that are toxic themselves, such as centipedes, millipedes, beetles, and ants, are all on the wild poison frog's menu, and the toxins of those insects are transferred to the frog. Without the toxic bugs, there can't be toxic frogs.
This means that poison dart frogs grown in captivity are essentially harmless, which is why some people are able to have them as pets without fearing getting poisoned or hurt. So now that that's out of the way, how does BTX itself actually work? So if we look at the chemical structure for BTX, we can see that there's two main sections of it. So the first is a section I have in yellow, and it's made up of 4 carbon rings. This section of the molecule is pretty similar to some other common molecules that are in our body. For instance, cholesterol. As you can see, those hexagons and the pentagon on the end of carbon rings, they look quite similar. So this section of the molecule is going to be what allows BTX to get through your cell membrane, specifically in your nerve cells. Then there's the purple part on the end, and this is the part that makes the overall molecule an alkaloid, as you can see with that NH group, and this is the toxic part per se that's really doing the damage to your body. So how BTX works is it basically uses that carbon ring end of the section that was in yellow before, and it's going to use that to get through the phospholipid bilayer of the cell, and then that toxin end of it is going to bind to the sodium voltage gated channels in your nerve cells, and this is basically going to permanently open those channels.
It irreversibly binds to sodium channels in nerve cells, rendering the polar membranes nonpolar. Nerve cells require polar membranes to send signals. Without it, the nerve cells cannot transmit information, resulting in paralysis. It also affects heart muscles and can cause cardiac arrest. There is no known antidote.
As a recap, BTX works by first paralyzing the victim instantly, which then leads to cardiac arrest and inevitably to death. And all of this happens within a span of 10 or less minutes. And again, during this 10 minutes, there's nothing that the person who's affected can do because there's no cure or treatment, so they're basically just sitting there, paralyzed, waiting for their inevitable death. Okay, so BTX sounds pretty dangerous and all, but just how much of it is needed to kill a human? In a few words, not a lot. According to Simon Cotton, a chemistry professor at the University of Birmingham, a lethal dose of BTX for the average 150-pound person is only 136 micrograms. To put that amount in perspective, a single drop of water has over 50,000 micrograms. And again, the lethal dose of BTX is 136. And even if you compare this amount to synthetic chemical weapons, BTX is still significantly more potent and dangerous. For example, VX gas, a synthetic nerve agent, requires around 10 milligrams to be lethal, and sarin gas, another chemical weapon, requires 100 to 500 milligrams, both of which are significantly higher than the 136 micrograms BTX needs to be lethal. With such potency, it's no wonder that BTX has been used to make weapons in the past.
People have known about the toxic effects of these frogs for thousands of years. Natives of Western Colombia have used skin extracts from certain poison frogs to coat the tips of their blow darts for hunting.
Historically, the only people known to have used the toxins from poison dart frogs as blow dart poison are the indigenous Colombian people of the Batrachotoxin tribe and the Choco tribe. Despite there being over 170 different species of poison dart frogs, only 3 species were actually used by the Choco people as sources of poison for their darts, which is kind of ironic. The reason that this few were used was because a lot of frogs that we call poison dart frogs today aren't actually poisonous, or their poison is very mild, so they wouldn't have been useful to actually coat darts with the poison of. The frogs that the Choco did use were all from the Phyllobates genus, because these are the only frogs that actually contain BTX, and therefore their poison is significantly more potent and dangerous than that of the other frogs. So to actually extract the poison from the frogs for these darts, the Choco people used two different methods depending on the species of frog that they were extracting from. The first method of extraction was used for Phyllobates aretania and Phyllobates bicolor species of the frogs. How it worked is the frogs were impaled and then they were held over a fire. And the job of the fire was to essentially make the frog sweat out its toxin. And so what they would do is they would have a leaf under the frog, and then as the frog is sweating out its toxin, basically drip down, and then it would collect on the leaf. And so they would be able to collect all of the toxin coming out of the frog. And then once the frog seemed like it was just out of toxin, it's not going to have any more, they basically just have this pool of toxin on here that they could use to coat dart tips. The second method that was used, which was only able to be used with the Phyllobates terribilis species, was to basically just rub the dart tip on the back of the frog. And what this was doing was just physically taking the toxin from the skin glands on their backs. And the reason this could only be done with the Phyllobates terribilis, or the golden dart frog, was because they have almost 20 times as much BTX as the other Phyllobates frogs do. So there's enough being secreted on their back that you can literally just take it. And not only could you just take it from their back, but you could actually go back and usually coat anywhere between 5 to 20 darts from one frog. And the variance is just because it depends on the size of the frog and the size of your dart heads. But that's a lot of darts. And then once you were done extracting and getting however many darts you wanted, the frog was basically just released and could just, hop away and keep going harm-free. According to the American Museum of Natural History, the Choco have used these darts for hundreds of years, for both hunting and fighting against other humans. Specifically in cases where they were up against other humans, BTX was much more potent than the various plant poisons that neighboring tribes were using, so this gave the Choco an upper hand in any tribal conflicts because it allowed them to seamlessly paralyze and kill any of their enemies. Additionally, although some of the toxin extraction methods did require killing the frogs, according to the Princeton Press, these species are relatively abundant, and so killing some of them for extraction won't harm the ecosystem or the supply of frogs for future toxin extraction. This means that using the poison dart frogs as a natural source of BTX for chemical weapons is sustainable in the long run. The Choco's success with their poison darts suggests that the BTX from poison dart frogs can be used for more than just tribal blow darts in Colombia in the future. BTX could be used globally as a chemical weapon by harvesting the BTX from the frogs beforehand and then using it to coat darts or bullets or really any other projectile you want to try with. And since the toxin can be extracted sustainably, there isn't a worry of running out of resources. It's also important to note that the main alternative chemical weapon to a poison dart is probably a gas. And although gases obviously have an advantage of being able to hit many people at once, this is also a big flaw that they have. In situations where civilians or hostages are present, the gas obviously can't differentiate between targets, so people who shouldn't be getting targeted are being affected by the gas. Additionally, from a soldier's point of view, this might not be the most comfortable thing to use, because there's always a chance it could spread and come back to them if some wind blows it, or that someone could pick up the gas bomb canister thingy and just throw it back. With poison darts, none of these risks are present. The dart is only going to affect whoever it hits, and that person isn't going to be able to just take the dart out and shoot it at someone else or anything like that, because they're going to be paralyzed as soon as they're hit. This means that you'll be able to effectively take out targets without having to harm the person who shouldn't be getting harmed during this conflict. In conclusion, BTX makes a very effective chemical weapon for a few different reasons. First, it has an extremely small lethal dose of just 136 micrograms for the average 150-pound person. Additionally, it will paralyze the victim basically instantly, so even if it does take up to 10 minutes to kill them, the enemy is basically just sitting there like a bump on a log waiting to die. Additionally, the extraction process can be done safely and sustainably, making it very easy to use this chemical globally. And lastly, these weapons are very precise in comparison to the alternate of a chemical gas, so you're not going to accidentally harm civilians or your own soldiers while using it. So they had their frog impaled on a stick dead, and then they would take a fire and they would roast the frog over it. And basically let it sweat. Oh no! Oh no, the frog has caught fire. Oops.